It's a pleasure to welcome to this show Lindsay Moran, who is a former CIA operative with over 20 years' experience across a broad professional spectrum, including covert operations, investigations, social impact, and communications. She has lectured at Harvard and at Yale and also at the Harvard University John F. Kennedy School of Government. And it's wonderful to speak to you, Ms. Moran. Let me ask you, first of all, because you've specialized in communications, there are conflicting reports about the level to which Putin's propaganda machine has worked with his own people. Do you believe the accounts that suggest that he is overwhelmingly popular at home and that the war is supported by 80, 90% of Russians?
I don't know if those exact figures or percentages are right, but I will say that I think his propaganda efforts have been largely successful in Russia, and that's probably one of the scariest things about this conflict. You know, when it first started, I had this thought that Russia has enjoyed now years of, while not full freedom of expression, certainly a lifting of the kind of, repression and state control that existed during the Soviet Union. And I thought, there's no way that Vladimir Putin can stuff that genie back in the bottle. And yet, we have seen that happen. We have seen Russian mothers denouncing their children, or Russian fathers denouncing their children who speak out against the war. I don't know if it's so much a case of the propaganda being successful as fear of the consequences that could happen in Russia if you do speak out, if you even refer to the, quote, special military operation as a war. You face 15 years in jail. So it's easy for us, I think, with our American hubris, to look over and say, why aren't the people rising up against him? Why aren't ordinary Russians doing something? And we forget that Russian citizens have a very different relationship, not just with Vladimir Putin than we do with our leaders, but with the state and with news and how they react to things. So I'm going to say I do think his propaganda machine has largely been effective within Russia.
Okay, and presumably there's an account of United States intelligence helping Ukraine with its air defenses and of a Russian plane carrying hundreds of troops being shot down by the Ukrainians. That's probably not getting much attention in Russia.
No, that's getting no attention in Russia. I mean, look, Vladimir Putin and Russian officials have backed out of Kiev, trying to take down Kiev, and have kind of skulked away, but claiming success. And they have not had success in Kiev. They had not had success in Odessa. What we have seen from the Russian military has been astounding and humiliating. I mean, not just the lack of discipline and resorting to barbaric, inhumane tactics, but even their operational security is just pathetic. You have Russian generals getting off left, right, and center, and they're using cell phones, they're using open communications on the battlefield. I mean, I got to say, my teenage kids don't use open communications like that when they play paintball. So everything that we're seeing on the outside, all of these humiliations, the defeats for Russia, the many Russian soldiers lost, lives lost, ships sunk, that is all being spun in a much different way within Russia.
I can imagine. And in terms of the Foreign Legion of volunteers from United States, Canada, from neighboring nations, from Poland, people, they estimate up to 20,000 foreigners have volunteered to fight for Ukraine. You've actually met with some of those people, is that right?
I have actually former veterans, friends who have volunteered and gone to Ukraine. Now, I will say that I think, and I've said this before, I can completely understand particularly on the part of veterans, that impulse to want to go fight for Ukraine. You know, what we see is a real clear delineation between good and evil in the world. And we have so many veterans who fought in Afghanistan and saw, you know, a 20-year war and all of their efforts come to naught, or who fought in Iraq, where the U.S. had a much more muddled mission, and they're kind of hand-delivered this mission where it's really clear that they're on the side of good, and there is that impulse to want to get involved. And I think U.S. and Western veterans who've had combat experience can be of tremendous help to people in Ukraine. All that said, there's also, you know, ordinary citizens going over with no combat experience and no training. And that, to me, I think is probably not a wise idea. The risks far outweigh the gain, either to Ukraine or to the West.
And in terms of the aid that is now flowing to Ukraine, do you believe that to keep the momentum for the Ukrainian side, that aid needs to be increased?
I do, 100%. You know, we had the Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin, you know, saying Ukraine can win this war. Ukraine will win this war. And that was, I think, a real eureka moment, you know, for the whole world. You know, I've got to believe that Vladimir Putin heard about it. You know, I had the thought, is this just a psyop against Putin himself? But, you know, I think the West and Western officials and Western military experts are seeing something that we didn't think we'd see, which is Ukraine really holding tough. Not only being able to defend themselves against the Russian military to an extent that we didn't anticipate, but being able in some places to go on the offensive. And I think while that momentum is building and while we, the West, we, the U.S., are committing aid, committing armaments, we can't step back now. We have to, I don't want to say escalate, that's not the right word, but we have to build off that momentum. We have to build off the will of the Ukrainian people if this is going to be a success. And by a success, I mean, you know, driving Russia out.
And then apparently there's a lot of coverage that Putin wants desperately to have some kind of victory to boast about on Victory Day, celebrating the triumph over the Nazis by Russia and, at that time, her allies, America and Britain. That's celebrated in Russia on May 9th, so it's soon. Do you worry about the deployment of some kind of tactical nuclear weapons before that time?
I don't, and I don't want to say I completely don't worry, but I don't think that is what he's going to pull out of his hat for the victory. I do think, you know, I worry about the Donbass region and the movement of troops there, and his attempt to cut off that region and focus on that region because, you know, it didn't work in Kiev, it didn't work in Odessa. So I worry about escalation there. I do worry in the long term about a nuclear escalation, but I know, you know, we're monitoring the movement of Russian nuclear armaments. I don't think that's going to happen on May 9th or because of May 9th. I think May 9th is going to be a dog and pony show with more propaganda. Whatever he can claim as a victory, he's going to claim as a victory. And one thing I think we might look to as the U.S., as we become a little stronger in our rhetoric, is Putin reframing this, as he's already tried to do, as U.S. versus Russia and West versus Russia.
You need to read the critically acclaimed best-selling memoir by our guest, Lindsay Moran. It is called Blowing My Cover. It's posted at our website at michaelmedved.com. Have a wonderful weekend. Godspeed to you. When we come back, the war at home, ? That and more on The Medved Show.